Today's episode is brought to you by Alexandra Park BJJ. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a full-contact martial art and combat sport that was developed in Brazil in the 20th century. With roots in Judo and Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, has been developed and refined into a unique grappling art with the aim to allow a smaller and weaker individual to beat a bigger and stronger opponent with the application of proper technique. Based in Muswell Hill, North London, Alexandra Park BJJ's classes are designed so that you can develop your fitness levels, balance, coordination and flexibility in a no-pressure environment, and to provide the opportunity to start a new sport at a reasonable price. At Alexandra Park BJJ, we aim to be inclusive so that everyone can benefit from this incredible art, not just the athletic or ultra-competitive. To book your free class, head over to alexandraparkbjj.co.uk or email inquiries at alexandraparkbjj.co.uk.
Welcome to Audiobookish, an audiobook review and discussion podcast looking at audiobooks both big and small, as well as radio plays, narrative podcasts, anything audiobook-ish. This podcast may contain spoilers, rants, curse words, mispronunciations of names and places, and more.
Hello everyone, you're listening to Audiobookish. My name is Fahed Rahman, and as always, I am joined by Poppy Knight.
Hello.
And we've got two guests joining us today. We've got Imogen Church and Alba Proko. They'll be here to talk about the audio festival taking place on the 22nd of November. It's Bookouture's audio festival, which is an online celebration of audiobooks that's now in its third year. Bookouture are a leading publisher of best-selling commercial fiction and are hugely passionate about enabling people to enjoy their titles in the format that works best for them, including audiobooks. The day will include personal videos from bloggers, readers, and authors about why they love audiobooks, important insights from people in the blind and dyslexic communities about why audiobooks are important to them, and interviews with narrators or voice actors and authors who've had their stories brought to life. Poppy, would you like to read out Imogen's bio, please?
Yes, so Imogen is an award-winning actor and scriptwriter, ex-Burlesque dancer, adoptive parent, and lover of satire. Her debut novel, Death and the Burlesque Maiden, was published by Audible Originals in 2021, and her one-woman full-cast horror comedy audio drama, Boop, has just been released on XigXag. She narrates audiobooks like an absolute boss, and she acts the pants off audio dramas in an array of roles, ranging from meglomaniac, evil lizard queen, to psychopathic steampunk engineer. She scriptwrites satire and horror comedy.
And Alba Proko is the head of audio publishing at Bookouture, having joined in 2020 from Bonnier Books, UK. She has worked on a variety of audiobooks over the past 8 years, from best-selling celebrity memoirs to romantic fantasy with a bit of spice, some of which have been shortlisted and won audiobook awards. A big part of her job is casting narrators and overseeing production. So hello and welcome, and how are you both doing?
Hello, very good, thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm really excited to be here.
Oh, wonderful, we're pleased to have you.
That's great. So Poppy, do you want to maybe start with the first question?
Yeah, so we thought we'd start off with kind of a, how did you get into audiobooks, and what kind of audiobooks you like to listen to and stuff like that, get a flavour of how you like audiobooks. So Imogen, do you want to kick us off?
I will give you my origin story.
Please do.
It might take a minute. So I was an out-of-work actor for a long time, just doing your average kind of a commercial a year, maybe a play, blah-de-blah-de-blah. And after years of not really having much success, I had a moment where I thought, oh, do you know what? I'd love to do audiobooks. So I got in touch with the RNIB, which is Royal National Institute for Blind People, and kind of said, I've got this skill. Could I be of any use to you? And they said, come in and audition. So I went in and read a bit of a kid's book for my audition. And they kind of said, well, you know, there are millions of kind of middle-class white girls with acting talent, blah, blah, blah. And then I happened to mention that I had spent a couple of years as a burlesque dancer. At which point, the guy who was auditioning me went, oh, really? So the RNIB have a policy whereby only 2 blind people have to request a specific book, and then they have to record it. They get a lot of requests for audio porn. So when I said I'd been a burlesque dancer and worked in cabaret, they were like, oh my God. And they were like, would you mind reading erotica? And I was like, I don't care. Yeah, and I had my first job within like 2 weeks. And my first however many books were all audio erotica. So that was kind of how I began. And after that, a little while later was when the lovely 50 Shades of Grey came out, and all the big commercial publishers were like, oh God, we better publish some audio porn. Who do we get to narrate it? Oh, I know, the RNIB do loads of erotica, let's ask them. And amongst some other people, they said, get Imogen in. So I did some audio erotica for the big publishers, and it went really well. And they were like, can you narrate things other than nips and bums? And I was like, yeah, I can. And that's kind of how it all began. So there we go.
Awesome, yeah. And so, Alba, how did you start getting into audiobooks and into the job you're in now?
I just love Imogen's story, and I don't think mine can be as interesting as that. Well, I think as you'd expected, a lot of people working in publishing, they have an English degree. So I sort of come from an English degree background, but I've always been very interested in digital publishing. It's such a fascinating area. And at the start of my career, this was obviously mostly ebooks. But then audio started becoming very popular. And so my role focused more on audiobooks. And as Imogen said, once they start becoming really, really popular, publishers suddenly wanted to produce and publish more audiobooks than ever. So they were like, okay, let's establish audio departments now and try and make as many audiobooks as possible and give a lot of actors a lot of work. So I started sort of focusing more on audiobooks and audio production. And now I'm working on audiobooks as well as being part of the editorial team, which is also a bit more creative. And
Wonderful.
Okay, that's great. So kind of what type of audiobooks do you both tend to like to listen to?
Well, interestingly, because I obviously work on mostly fiction day in, day out, when I'm listening, I tend to like non-fiction. And my absolute favourite is biographies, autobiographies and biographies. So yeah, that's always my choice. And I guess it's because I spend all day narrating fiction.
Yeah, same for me. I think I think non-fiction audiobooks are a really good way of getting into audiobooks when you're first starting out, not sure about the format, how it's going to work for you. So I did sort of start listening on my first audiobooks. They were definitely biographies narrated by the authors themselves. And since then, I've sort of moved away a bit from non-fiction, trying to do more like fantasy now. But I felt like initially I couldn't really focus as much as a listener. I couldn't really focus as much in the story. But I think you just start developing that connection with the format. And then I just really got into them so much that I'm now taking my audiobooks with me when I'm showering.
Brilliant, yeah. I got a little duck speaker thing, so you could listen in the bath and in the shower and stuff like that. But I'll be honest, it's not very good, so it wasn't very clear. But a nice listen in the bath is definitely good.
I love that. Well, a lot of phones now are, waterproof, so you can just bring them with you.
Yeah, no, it's really good. And then also, what you said there about kind of using non-fiction to get into audiobooks, I sort of had a bit of the other way around because I used audio to get into non-fiction. As long-time listeners of the podcast will know, I didn't really listen to much non-fiction, and then Fahad introduced me to quite a bit through audio, and I've since really enjoyed it because, I think it's a good way to get into, kind of topics that you maybe wouldn't normally be as invested in, or difficult concepts or various things like that. It can be a really good format for that. And I think, we've been wanting to speak about sort of different types of audiobooks, different genres, which you think work, so well in audio, and about how they're treated differently as well, different genres and stuff like that.
Sort of from what works well in audio, it's very similar to what works well in other formats. But in terms of how immersive you can get with audiobooks, crime and thriller are definitely one of the top genres that work so well in the UK and the US as well. Non-fiction has a big chunk of that. And as you said, like biographies led by celebrities, Self-help and a lot of the smart thinking kind of audiobooks are really great for consumption because it makes everything sound a lot simpler, and you can easily sort of dip in and out of it without having to listen to the whole thing. So those are sort of one of the top genres that are absolutely great for audiobooks. SFF, science fiction fantasy, is also very big, but I think that's also a lot more in the States. And I do think there's definitely genres out there that can do a lot better in audio, and romance is one of them. Obviously, romance has a lot of different subgenres, and erotica is one of them. But I think there's just so much potential with romance in audiobooks. And also, obviously, let's not forget children's books that can be so immersive and so much fun to listen to in audio.
Yeah, I was asked to do a trilogy of kids' books a couple of years ago, and I said yes, partly because Chris Riddell was the illustrator and I got really fangirly, but also because I thought maybe it'll get my son into audiobooks. So he has been listening to book 1 of the trilogy on loop for 4 years.
Brilliant.
For 4 years. But I would say, and I'd read about this because I have a master's in children's literature, so I knew this was kind of talked about in academia, but I've seen it work. His literacy since he started listening to audiobooks just went through the roof. It's mad.
Yeah, definitely. No, there's been so many benefits for it and stuff like that, and kind of, studies and things like that. But just anecdotally, I know that listening to audiobooks as a kid, got me into the career I'm in now and everything like that. And, I was listening to stories above my reading level, which helped with comprehension and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, as well as just enjoying it and finding it really fun and getting into performance and stuff like that.
So talking of listening when you're a kid, going right back to the origin story, I learned to read listening to these cassette tapes that came with a matching comic. And they would come every fortnight, and it would have excerpts of longer stories like The Wizard of Oz, and it would have short stories and poems, and you would follow the text in the comic. And then when it was time to turn the page, you would hear this bing, and you would listen and read at the same time. And that's how I learned to read. And I remember listening, it had amazing actors in it like Miriam Margolyes, Derek Jacobi, Hayley Mills, all these wonderful people. And I still have to pinch myself sometimes when I think, oh my God, I grew up to do that for a job.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. And so talking of that then, what do you think makes kind of audio such an exciting kind of sphere to work in? So yeah, for you, Imogen, as opposed to acting of other different mediums of acting, on stage and TV and that kind of thing. And then yeah, for Alba, as opposed to those other areas of publishing, kind of print publishing, ebook publishing and stuff like that.
For me personally, the absolute best thing about audio is the intimacy of it. So the only other kind of acting art form that's really, really super intimate is film. But then you're not shooting, you never shoot stuff in sequence, you do retakes, blah, 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 blah. So if you're doing a play, you can just go through the story in sequence and really get into it, but it doesn't have anywhere near the intimacy that audio and film do. But audio, for me, as quite a shy, hermit-like actor, I just get to sit in a room, sink into the characters, go in sequence and just play out this entire kind of audio movie in my head. Yeah. And the distance between you and the microphone is like a hand's width. That's how close you are to your audience. There's nothing else that's that intimate and, I don't know, just tender, really. That's what I love about it. I always say to people who are starting out and who want to know how to get into it, you have to imagine you're sitting right next to your best friend and just telling them this story. You don't have to project or throw it to the back stalls. You just sit next to somebody you love and tell them a story, which I love.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, what an answer.
Yeah, it's the same for me actually. When you work with authors who are reading their own audiobooks, that's actually the first advice that I give them. Imagine you're telling your story to a friend so that it comes more naturally. You just get that intimacy through the microphone more easily that way. And I mean, for me, it's a phrase that we use all the time, but audiobooks do bring the author's stories to life in an amazing way. It's a very powerful format, and it's amazing when I see, when narrators have done an outstanding job. It has actually brought authors to tears listening to the story in a good way. It's just such an accessible format and has the potential to fit in well with a busy lifestyle when people might not necessarily have the time to sit down and read. And also, as you said earlier, like it helps with literacy and also with learning differences. But also another sort of amazing thing about the format is it has brought a lot of people into reading. Like there are a lot of people out there who've never bought any books. But if audio wasn't a thing, they would never really read anything. So that's one of the many things that I love about working in audio. It's just so accessible to everyone.
I get messages, I get emails like that a lot, actually, from people who say, I was so embarrassed and felt really ashamed that I wasn't a reader. And listening to you makes me feel like I've become a reader, to which I write back and say, you are the original reader, because original stories were originally told through the ears. So I call it ear reading instead of eye reading, and eye reading came centuries later. So I always write back to them and say, you are the OG, you are the original reader. And that's also, I think, why it's so popular, and I don't think it'll ever change, is because we have that hardwired love of listening to another human being tell us a story.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Great. So can you maybe like both talk like briefly about the life of an audiobook, kind of, how does that start getting into like production? Maybe Alba, you can kind of maybe start when you get the script for the book, and how does that kind of process begin for you?
Yes. So we obviously wait for the book to be written and edited. We might have some discussions with the team originally, especially if it's a very specific kind of casting that we need. But essentially, once we have a manuscript that has been edited, we start the casting process. And the casting process can take several weeks, and it can take different forms. We have what we call a casting brief. So it's very sort of detailed information about main characters and everything else that we need in order to make a decision about casting. And we get in touch with a lot of agencies out there, or if we have direct contacts with narrators, we get in touch with them directly, see if they're interested, and if they would be available as well. And once that, we get shortlists, and then we pick our narrator or narrators. And once the casting is completed, we confirm the recording dates with the narrator, and that also depends on how long the audiobook is. So usually you'd be in the booth recording for at least 2 days or 3 days for a normal length audiobook, like 7 hours, let's say 7-8 hours. And that's a full day of, a full working day recording. And yes, and then sort of once that's confirmed, we then work with the narrator to do any research before recording. And I think Imogen can say a bit more about what she does to prep the manuscript.
Yeah, so I would read through the whole book in really good detail once before going in to narrate it. So that includes making kind of notes on the different characters, looking up words, even words that I think I know. Quite often when I look them up, I'm like, oh my God, I have mispronounced that for my entire life. So looking up words, character notes, trying to work out just kind of the feel and the tone of the story, and then sometimes asking the author, which can be a whole can of worms if you go down the road the wrong direction. But yeah, asking them if they want any input on any particular characters or accents or anything like that. And then, as Alba said, most books are kind of, 3 days in studio. I have done fantasy books that were 6 days because they can be 600 pages, 700 pages. Yeah, and then we do kind of an office day, so 10 till 5 type thing. And you tend to do 4 sessions of about an hour and 15 each, which is just you reading non-stop, bar mistakes, and then breaks in between. So that's a kind of regular office day in the studio. And most books, like I said, take about 3 days. Yeah.
Yeah, so once Imogen, for example, once she has narrated the full audiobook, then we have what we call the post-production stage. And then the first part of that stage is the proof listener who will have the manuscript on their screen and also listen to the recording line by line. And they will note any background noise, any sort of mispronunciations, any inconsistencies with names or anything like that. Anything basically they find that they think we need to edit out or re-record. And after they've done their sort of report on that, we then sort of check if we need to do any pickups with the narrator where we have to re-record a sentence again or any phrases. And then once that's done, it goes into the editing stage where they basically clean up the audio, they add in any changes with the pickups. And the final stage is the sound mixing and mastering stage, where they get the levels of the audio to where it needs to be, get everything in chapters, so it's good to go to retailers. And I think depends obviously on the length of the audiobook and how complex the production has been, but it can take anything, like the whole production can take anything from minimum 2 weeks to 5 weeks. It depends, but it is not a quick process. It takes a few steps, and it's not like ebooks, for example, where you can just get it converted and done very quickly. It's quite a long process.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, thank you. That's really interesting for people to hear. Funny for me, with a lot of that being what I do in my day-to-day. Nice to hear someone else describing it and putting it out like that. So Alba, one thing I was wondering as well was kind of if you could tell the listeners what kind of things you look at when casting narrators. So I know you talked about obviously it aligning with the brief and who the characters are and stuff like that. But maybe even just sort of when you're listening to those auditions or whatever, what kind of things stand out to you for who's going to be a great narrator for this book?
Sure, yeah. I have to say, I do feel like a film casting director sometimes when I'm casting for audiobooks, because, in a way you're doing exactly what they're doing, but you're just focusing on the voice and the characters that you have in the book. So I will look at the main characters. I'll look at sort of their age, what's the voice, gender, how many accents do we have, how many voices do we have, what point of views do we have, is it first person or third person? And then obviously it depends on whether it's a complex book or not. As Imogen was saying, like an epic fantasy book can be so long and it will have so many characters that sometimes it's good to have a more experienced narrator in the genre, and also to cast someone who has like a variety of character voices they can do, so they can distinguish between each character. And also obviously you have historical books that could have a lot of other languages, a lot of other pronunciations in them, foreign pronunciations. So it might be good to look at what other languages are needed for the narrator to know, or at least be able to pronounce. I think the two main things apart from all of this is their tone suitable for the story and the genre. For example, you can't really have an upbeat voice for a heartbreaking historical book. You kind of have to reconcile the two. But it's something else that we also do, and we're really proud of that, is we nurture a lot of new narrators when we think there's potential talent. So, and also, how open narrators can be to casting and directing as well, because not everyone can narrate audiobooks really well, even people who have won Oscars.
Yeah. That is very, very true. Yeah. I have a friend who writes and directs a lot of audio drama, and he was trying to get Maggie Smith for something. And she just turned him down flat and said, "Darling, I'm shit at radio." So yeah, it's a really niche skill. If you have it, it's wonderful, wonderful career. But just because you're a good actor doesn't necessarily mean you have that niche skill. You just have to try. And the best way to try, if you're keen to get into it, is just read out loud at home for a long period of time. And if you want to cut your own face off, don't do it.
So true.
Yeah, you've got to be comfortable with sitting and reading, as you're saying, for long days and be happy with that. And yeah, be able to do those different voices and things and have that skill. So yeah, it's certainly very difficult and not to be taken for granted at all.
Yeah, definitely. What's the most surprising thing that you've learned from working in audio that you think our listeners wouldn't be aware of?
Personally, how noisy clothes are.
So true.
So there are so many different fabrics of clothing, obviously, but even so, most of the stuff I wear is cotton, but there are different types of cotton, and you wouldn't believe how noisy some cottons are. I was doing this job, a drama job with an amazing, really experienced actress, and her top was so noisy, she had to go behind a screen and take it off and just wear her jacket with nothing underneath. So yeah, the noise of even the tinkle of a watch, if you're moving your hand around, earrings, Yeah, the noises, the extraneous noises, which also includes, I would say, how noisy your stomach gets when you're hungry.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's one of the things that surprised me a lot when I started working with audiobooks. I have a funny story as well, very similar to that, where a narrator was wearing very noisy trousers. And they had to take them off.
Was it a shellfish?
But at least, because you're in different booth recording and there's a table, above your waist, you couldn't really see anything. So, but it's amazing how like the microphone picks up every single thing that you do. But what it's really like something else that really surprised me is how intense it is. As Imogen was saying, you're literally in a dark, tiny booth for 7 hours every day, and you're just reading off your screen for so long that you also need to be focused as well. So I think that is just so intense. When I did it for like 2 hours in the studio, as when I'm accompanying an author or a narrator, I walk out with a headache. So I'm in awe of all narrators out there. Like how, like it's definitely a skill, but also being able to stay still for 7 hours every day. It's amazing.
This was going to be my other point, actually, is how physically exhausting it is. It's shocking because you just think you're just sitting in a chair reading a lovely book. But actually, when you're, particularly the way I narrate books, when you're really gunning fully for all the characters, all the emotion, as Alba said, it's really common for me to come out of the studio and just have a stinking headache and be absolutely exhausted.
So, I mean, have you kind of developed the habit of like stopping to fidget? Because I fidget a lot when I'm doing the podcast. I was just wondering if that's something that you'd had to learn how to do, is to maybe stop fidgeting.
I think I have, and I think I always have had a freakish ability to just sink into almost like a trance-like state of laser focus. So weirdly, I don't fidget. I don't find myself fidgeting while I'm working, but I have to exercise before and after. And it's like getting rid of all the adrenaline. So maybe if I didn't exercise before, I might be more fidgety. But yeah, I do have a sickening laser focus that means I just sit. But the flip side of that is it means at the end of the day, you've got a crick in your neck, your back's playing up because you've just been so tensely still for this whole day.
Yeah, definitely. And I imagine some studios are more comfortable than others as well, and kind of seats and things like that for sitting that length of time, or the position where the script is for you reading off and where the mic is for you speaking into and stuff like that makes that difficult.
Definitely. And also depending on the studio and depending on the weather. So there was a studio I used to work at a lot, and it was just a series of black boxes. There was no aircon because silent aircon is so expensive. Only the big studios have that. And so all of us would come out for breaks in our pants, in our like underwear, in need of ice lollies, running our head under the water, because it was just like it was slightly like torture.
Yeah. And so what we've learned is when you're listening to an audiobook, the person talking to you is probably not wearing many clothes, either because they're noisy or because they're too warm. One of the two.
And also, a lot of the studios and the booths, there are no windows around. So you have absolutely no idea what time it is, what's the weather outside. It's a bit like you're in a casino. And you just come out and you're like, when am I?
Yeah. Which maybe good at the moment with the fact that it's now just getting darker earlier, and was just saying earlier how I'm just tired already and it feels like the end of the day. So yeah, I guess in that sense it can be sometimes a nice surprise or a less nice surprise when you come out and don't know what time it is.
Yeah, Poppy, do you want to take the next question?
I mean, the next one we have on our list is a bit more about the festival, Alba, if you'd be able to tell us a bit more about that, kind of what people can look forward to, how to join, things like that.
Yeah, of course. So we started in 2021, and we have a dedicated day once a year to celebrate audiobooks and our love for them, spread the word about the format and why it's so great, but also to build the audiobook community even further. So what we're doing this year is we're sharing a lot of personal videos from bloggers and authors and readers, along with any narrators. We're doing giveaways, we're doing competitions. We have limited time, free to listen, handpicked audiobooks for the day. And we're also doing a lot of interviews with authors and narrators. And actually this year we're doing our live interview on TikTok for the first time with Laura Horwitz, who is a narrator and TikTok creator. And she's absolutely hilarious. So I'm really looking forward to that one. And everyone can just follow Bookouture on social media, and also they can post through the hashtag Audio Festival. And I have to say, everyone is welcome, even if you're skeptical about whether audiobooks can work for you or not. Just give it a go and see what everyone is talking about.
Yeah, awesome.
And what's the lineup going to be like for the festival? Have you got your guests confirmed and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's across all of our authors and bloggers. Everyone can join. And Laura, the narrator, is one of our guests, but also we're just confirming an author and a narrator together to talk about the production of their audiobook. And I think that's quite nice and quite important to see how the narrator can take the author's story and then sort of bring it to life, and then also hear from the author's perspective about what they thought of the audiobook and how, what they think about audiobooks and their stories being brought to life in audiobook format. So that's going to be quite interesting as well. And we're just doing a variety of things across the day until late in the evening. And we're just going to hear from all of communities, as I said before, like people in blind and dyslexic community, and also from our studios that we work with. And we very much encourage all of our narrators to join as well.
That sounds great. What part of the festival are you going to be looking forward to the most?
I'm interested in the panel with the narrator and the author. So I narrate all of Ruth Ware's books, and I got to interview her earlier in the year. And it was really, really fascinating to get questions from the audience between the author and the narrator and how we work together, which for the most part is wonderful because Ruth just leaves me alone. Do whatever I want. But yeah, I'm really interested in that dynamic and how it feeds into each other, especially with series and especially with myself and Ruth, when you've been working together for 7 years doing a book each year. It's really interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Last year we did the same with one of our series, and it was just amazing to see how people remember doing the same voices for some characters when it's like you're book 16 in the series. How do you remember a character from book 2? So I think that's quite nice and very interesting conversation, and it's just you just see both sides as well and how narrators interpret the characters as well.
Yeah, I mean, what was that book on the Children's Book of the Year award that we listened to with Ian McKellen? What book was that?
The Wolfbane.
Wolfbane, and there was a bit at the end where Ian was kind of talking to the author, and they'd been on this like long journey together, kind of like because he'd done all the audiobooks in that series. So it's kind of authors and narrators can kind of develop kind of quite a personal relationship with each other.
Yeah, I did one trilogy where, and he was writing them as we went, and I chose a particular characterization for one of the characters and a voice he hadn't envisaged. And after he listened to it, he said, "Oh, I like that." So he kind of, I've given her this northern accent. And then for the second book, he just leant into it and gave her all of these wonderful kind of northern colloquialisms. And then another guy I worked with after doing his first book, in the second book, because he knew I was good at accents, deliberately wrote in a character who was described as sounding like a Russian Californian Barbie doll with nasal issues. He even messaged me on Twitter and was like, "Good luck."
That's amazing. It's also, from a listener's perspective as well, when it's a long-standing series, they're so committed and so dedicated to that particular narrator throughout the stories that if for whatever reason you dare switch the narrator to someone else, you have hell to pay.
It's so true.
Yeah, definitely. And it's really nice hearing that kind of stuff about like the collaboration with author and narrator and stuff like that. And especially when, they consider audio when they're writing, heard stories about kind of like oh, I never used to think about it, but then now when I write my books, I think about how someone's going to say it, or I think about this narrator's voice is in my head when I'm writing it, kind of thing, which is really, really nice. And really nice, obviously, for that kind of, the end product of it. It ends up being even better, and it's just an interesting thing in general. But then also, I think that promotion of the format and that inclusivity, which I know is a big reason why Bookouture are doing this festival, is promoting the fact that the audiobooks are inclusive. They allowed a lot of people to access books who otherwise wouldn't be accessing books. And so, the fact that authors are now considering those people in their audience for the books that they're writing is just so, so important. And I'm really glad that's happening.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we have authors who have, they've listened to every single audiobook. Yeah. And then for the next book, they actually make notes about what to refine in their writing. So it flows more easily in audiobook format. So I think it's part of growing as a writer as well. If you listen to your audiobooks, it can provide with so much insight about your writing as well.
Well, can I say, though, this is what I say to authors all the time. Don't leave it until the audiobook is made. Read your work out loud while you're still writing, right? Because sometimes I'll read a sentence out loud and it will be so repetitive. And I'll think, this person hasn't read it out loud. If they'd just taken the time, just bit by bit, to go through each chapter and read it out loud themselves, that's even a stage where you can work through stuff, without even having to let it get to the audiobook.
Oh, for sure. Definitely. Yeah. And I think to the earlier question of kind of what surprised you with working on audiobooks, what my answer would be around the kind of author input sort of side of it, because listening from a little kid, and one of the audiobooks that really got me into it was the His Dark Materials trilogy, where the narration is by Philip Pullman himself, and then there's actors doing the different characters. And I think I certainly had, and I think a lot of people have, this idea that, oh, well, the author knows best. The author knows how it would be said. They wrote that line. They know how they think it should be said, and stuff like that. And you often assume, oh, well, you want to hear it from the source. You want them to say it because they'd say it right. But actually, that's not necessarily the case. And a professional narrator who knows how to bring these characters to life, who can, add some real emphasis and excitement to it, that can be really, really interesting. And just because, a bit like we were saying, if it's a niche for actors, it certainly is for authors. Just because you can write amazing things doesn't mean you can sit in a studio for 7 hours a day and read them, or kind of direct people on how they should be reading it or anything like that. So I think, like you touched on, Imogen, there's sometimes the author will kind of fill in that brief and then let you get on with it, and then other times will be a lot more involved, and it really is a case by case kind of thing, I think. Do you find that?
Yeah, I do. And I've also heard from producers who've had authors narrating their own books who've just stopped and gone, I can't believe I wrote this shit. So sometimes, even for the author, they're like, what is this? Why did I do this? And I've heard of authors starting to try to do their books and then just giving up and saying, no, please, somebody else do that. And I was on a panel at the Cheltenham Literary Festival with Mark Billingham.
Oh, yeah.
Crime writer.
Yeah.
So he was an actor, used to be an actor. So he narrates all his own books. And he actually doesn't provide his final until he's narrated his book. Because as he's narrating it, I mean, it's probably a nightmare for the publishers. But
as the person whose job it is to chase finals, that would be my nightmare. But yes.
As he's narrating it, he's like, no, that doesn't work. Scribble, scribble, scribble. Make this change. Do this. So, I'm sure it's a nightmare for the publishers. But I thought, wow, that's really very insightful.
Yeah. And at least in that instance, I mean, the author's changing it, they're going to be happy with it, which is kind of the main thing for making sure you get the final and stuff like that. And one department doesn't change something in the print version that then never gets picked up in the audio and stuff like that. So,
yeah. And can you just tell us where people can join the festival? Is there like a website, social media, hashtag?
Yeah, the social media hashtag is Audio Festival, and we'll be posting across all of our social media platforms on the Bookouture channel. So Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok as well, where we'll be doing our live. So just across social media, and we're using the hashtag Audio Festival.
Okay, that's great. What does success look like to you both? And you can kind of take that as a macro, or as big as you want, or as small as you want.
Well, I mean, obviously, in the wider sense, just being happy. That's all that really counts. In terms of acting, I remember when I was at drama school thinking, I just want to be an actor. I'm not interested in being famous. If there was kind of a state-sponsored job where you got paid the same as a teacher to be an actor on payroll, I would still do it. And a lot of actors wouldn't, because it's about something else for them. So for me, finding audio has just been astonishing. I mean, other than the actors I know who are like properly famous, I work more than any actor I know. I'm never out of work and haven't been for about 14 years. It's just constant. So for me, I've just knocked it out the park and I'm very happy.
Wonderful.
Well, you're doing an amazing job with audiobooks, and you're definitely one of the most loved audio narrators out there.
Thank you.
I think as a publisher, obviously you're looking at the audiobooks you produce, and you want them to have good ratings and reviews, right? So, for us, success looks like good reviews, above four stars. And also because we are a commercial publisher, we are sort of focusing on sales, but that sort of is different for each genre. So it can mean different things for each genre as well. So overall, I think when you have a happy audience, when you have a happy author, that's what success looks like. And on a personal level for me, when I'm working with audiobooks, I think, that also gives me a lot of satisfaction. But also doing different things and working a variety of genres, it's so amazing. And I learn new things every single day. And working with different talent as well. And also, as I said, like nurturing new talent is really good to see narrators who've started narrating our audiobook, like their first audiobooks were our audiobooks. And then you see them picking up more work from different publishers and becoming quite established audiobook narrators. I think that's quite important in terms of being more inclusive and also trying to sort of cast a wider net and not just working with established narrators and trying to get more people into audiobooks, essentially trying to get more people to listen to audiobooks. And that's why we're doing this festival as well. When we're not publishing anything else on that day, we're just focusing on the audiobook festival, and everything on our platforms is about why we love audiobooks. And that's a big part of why, what success looks like for us as well.
Amazing. Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, both. That's been a really, really enjoyable discussion, and I've learnt a lot, and it's been really interesting.
Oh, thank you. It was really good.
Thank you once again for joining us. So before we kind of let you go, what are projects that we should be kind of looking to see from you next? Kind of like what the kind of big things coming next from you both, apart from the Audio Fest, that you'd like people to know about?
Well, I would like people to download XigXag, which is an awesome audio platform that has no subscription fee, and listen to my aforementioned one-woman full cast horror comedy audio drama, which is called Boop, and is about a bunch of foster kids who get adopted by a deranged wellness influencer. A big chunk of the proceeds will go to the charity Break, which does amazing work with kids in and around care. And it's just about raising awareness about kids from the foster care system and prejudice against them, and actually how awesome they are.
Brilliant.
Sounds really good. Well, I have a lot of audiobooks that I'm working on and I'm excited about. If I have to pick one, I'll pick The Housemaid is Watching by Frida McFadden. And, she's been an amazing author. And if you've listened to The Housemaid and The Housemaid's Secret, you'll absolutely love book 3 in the series and see what the main character is off to next. But that's not out until next year, 2024. But trust me, it's worth the wait.
Now, we did not plan this, but we are planning an episode about The Housemaid by Frida McFadden, so the first one in that series. So that's nicely tied in there. So listeners, keep your ears peeled for our review of that. Maybe go listen to it first and then come and join us for a chat about it. And then, carry on Alba's recommendation for the future ones in the series.
Yeah, you'll be in for a treat.
Awesome.
So once again, thank you to both of you for joining us. If you like, do you want to share your social media handles so people can kind of find you after they've find you? That's a sinister way of putting it.
Track you down.
So if people would like to follow you on social media, if you want to share your social media handles as well.
Yeah, I'm on lots of places, but I only really good on Instagram, which is at Imogen Church Gobshite. And my website, is www.imogenchurch.com, and you can email me through there.
Amazing. Yeah, so I think the best way to reach me is on Twitter. So my profile handle is at Alba_Adri. So that's ADRIE and capital P. Sorry, it's a very complicated way of saying I have two names. It's Alba Adriana.
Okay, that's great. Just to remind our listeners, the Audio Fest will be taking place on the 22nd of November. You'll be able to find it online at Bookouture's social media. You can email us at audiobookishpod@gmail.com, and you can follow us on social media at audiobookishpod. Thank you once again for joining us. Let's say goodbye, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for listening.